So after the terrible re-release of Multiverses, followed by the most disappointing state of play we've ever seen, I've just been let down too much back to back this week, and I need to talk about it a little. Because it's the same thing that's causing all these issues. It all boils down to one thing, and I absolutely hate it. But to fill you in, if you don't know what I'm talking about, Multiverses is a multiplayer platform fighter game like Smash Bros. That was in beta 2 years ago, went offline, and then came back to pretty much dismay from everyone involved. Because it came back with features taken out of the beta, with worse gameplay and more monetization thrown in, by adding in multiple different premium currencies to pay for, or spend hours trying to grind a tiny amount of. And it's basically been panned by everyone. And just a day or two ago, we've had PlayStation give us a state of play where they showed us the new Monster Hunter game, which was well received, followed by a disappointing slop of live service games. In fact, they opened the presentation with this game called Concord, which is a live service hero shooter that's coming out on the PlayStation 5. And it wasn't the only live service game to show. They've also shown the new Marvel live service game called Marvel Rivals. And in fact, it was a really disappointing presentation because it seemed to have a large focus on these types of games. And I'm pretty sure I don't need to tell you guys that these games have not been doing very well at all. They're all trying to copy the Overwatch success, but even Overwatch 2 is doing badly right now. We've had games like Redfall, Suicide Squad basically be dead in the water within a year. And we're still getting games like this because why? I'll tell you why. It's because some CEO wants to make the next Fortnite or the next FIFA Ultimate Team or the next Overwatch, which they probably think is still doing well. And it's that constant need to try and chase after what they think is going to bring them a lot of money. That just leads to us getting this really lazy slop of games that we know aren't going to be around in like 2 years from now. Like every single live service game they showed in that state of play, including Multiverses, which just came out, probably won't be around in 5 years from now. In fact, the only game from that presentation I think will probably be relevant by then is probably that Monster Hunter game, because it's one of the very few single-player games that they're bringing out, apart from like Astrobot and that really bad-looking Silent Hill 2 remake. And I want to talk about why this is still happening, because even though us, as the gaming audience, can very clearly see that none of these games are going to sell very well, because no one's going to want to buy them, I'm going to tell you why they keep coming out and why people are still making them. Brace yourself, it's a disappointing answer. I'm sure the most common thing you would have heard from people in regards to games as a service type model is vote with your wallet, which I'm sure a lot of people have shared that sentiment. If you don't like something, don't give them money, don't support them. Vote with your wallet is essentially just not paying for games that you don't want to see, and hopefully they'll get the message that way. However, that's a very flawed idea. I've talked about this in my previous video actually. But the entire premise of voting with your wallet when it comes to capitalism in general is the fact that you're giving the vote away to someone with a bigger wallet. So you might not pay any money to any of these games, right? But someone else out there will give a lot of money to these games, and it's those whales, essentially, as people call them, that small minority of people who spend a lot of money on these games. Those are the people these games are trying to capture. And that's why they'll keep making them. We'll see different flavors of live service games coming out almost on an annual basis. They'll be churned out like essentially shovelware, essentially is what they are. The shovelware for people who want to play games like this with a different coat of paint on them. Do you want a Marvel coat of paint? Do you want it to look like Overwatch? Do you want it to look like something else? I'm pretty sure there'll be a different one for everyone out there because they want to try and capture as much of that audience as possible because they realize they are the big spenders. Because the people who say vote with your wallet, they'll buy games that they like, right? But they won't spend the same amount as whales will do on these types of live service games. So even though you're voting with your wallet and you're playing the games that you want to see more of, those games will never make as much money as these bigger live service type games. And that's why we keep seeing them. And I told you, this is a disappointing answer. I'm sure everyone out there who thought they were making a difference voting with their wallet is probably just as let down as I am by the fact that we're still seeing this kind of crap being shoveled out to us. And it's coming from Sony as well, no less. Like, I was half expecting them to announce a battle pass for Monster Hunter when they announced it, considering every game they announced before that did have one. I think the only one that will even be relevant from now until like a few years from now is probably the Marvel one because it has the backing from Disney to keep that service alive. And brain-dead Marvel fans will consume anything with the Marvel logo on it. But this is incredibly disappointing for me because I was actually looking forward to games like Multiverse. So I like my platform fighters. I like Super Smash Bros. My favorite fighting game. And I wanted more competition in this space, right? The whole idea of capitalism and the free market is competition gives us better products, but instead, no, it's not, because they're not competing for our attention by giving us better products. 'Cause they can release things for free and get an audience instantly that way. What they're actually competing for is how much they can nickel and dime us with monetization. And that's the kind of BS that capitalism is starting to breed into our games. I don't know why more gamers aren't mad about this sort of thing. They're too busy arguing about the culture war, about a black samurai or a woman in a video game, or a pride flag somewhere. And they're too distracted arguing about that crap than they are to notice the fact that there are $100 Ultimate Editions that people are actually buying that are essentially full of crap. Like, have you seen the Star Wars Outlaws Ultimate Edition? Because the Ultimate Edition of that game is over $100. And this is what you get with it. You get 3 days of early access, and if Starfield is anything to go by, early access just means playing the most buggy build of the game possible. A season pass, apparently, or whatever DLC they do bring out, or don't, who knows, they might not even bring out anything. Like, a season pass isn't guaranteed of extra content. There are games out there, like Starfield, again, as an example, has a season pass. That DLC hasn't even come out yet, and that game is almost a year old. Alan Wake 2, I believe, also had a season pass, and that hasn't released any DLC. And the only other thing you get on top of that is a digital art book and some cosmetics. You're paying twice the price of a game for an art book, some cosmetics, and the promise of extra content. And people pay this kind of money for games like Redfall, which didn't even last a year. And I genuinely think that Multiverses is probably the biggest culprit here, because they had a beta period. And in that beta period, people were giving them feedback on what they can improve on and how they can change things, and they made the game worse. They took away so many features. I'll give an example with the perk system. So the perks in the beta period, you had a good selection of perks. They actually took away some of those perks, so you've got less perks now. But also, they've added in a currency that's a premium currency that you can use to purchase perks instead of unlocking them by leveling the character up, which is what you did in the beta. And before matches, what you can do in the beta is swap your perks around. If you and your teammate happen to have the same perks, the effects get doubled. Whereas now, you pick a loadout before going into matchmaking, and you just gotta hope that the person you matchmake with has the same loadout as you. And it's mind-boggling changes like this. It's realized that, like, they took 2 years to strip down a game that was more feature complete during a beta period, just to shoehorn in more monetization and predatory practices like that. The fact that they call themselves player-first games is practically laughable. And the worst part about all of this is there's really nothing you can do about it. Like, you can continue voting with your wallet and buying games that you want to pay for, and not supporting these types of shitty practices. But, like, you're not going to make any difference of that, because there are people out there who are actually going to just carry on throwing money on founders packs for games that are in beta for 6 months and disappear for 2 years. And I don't think a movement to boycott these games is really going to make much of a difference either. I think the most depressing aspect of all this is if those games don't do well, studios are just going to get shut down and people are going to get laid off. We've seen it already before, even with games that are successful, like Hi-Fi Rush winning multiple awards and making waves, even though it was on Game Pass on day one as a stealth launch. And that studio got axed by Microsoft without second thought. In fact, this whole debacle is having a massive impact on the industry. I'm not sure if you've noticed it, but it's really shrinking down the AA game market, because everything wants to be a AAA live service, or quadruple A as they're calling it. And because of studios constantly chasing after that infinitely monetizable live service type game model, the highly polished single player games and AA games are essentially getting left on the wayside. I do have a whole video talking about that on my channel, actually, if you want to check that out. But if you're as disappointed as I am, please let me know in the comments down below, because it looks like we're in for the long haul. I don't think we'll be seeing any slowdown of these live service shovelware games coming out. No matter how many successful single player games come out, like Alan Wake 2, God of War Ragnarok, Baldur's Gate 3 even, because it's really depressing to see this. I'm pretty sure Multiverse's developers probably have a passion for the platform fighting game scene, maybe. And it just reeks of some CEO came in and says, nah, make it more monetizable. Nickel and dime the shit out of this game. I can't help but feel bad for the people who actually wanted to make a really good fighting game. Anyway, that's enough out of me. I just had to complain about the state of the fucking industry right now, and just vent for a few minutes. But if you want to see more of my other videos, which are a lot more educational and informative, please do check them out here. I also stream on this channel, so feel free to pop by and say hi whenever I'm live. And I'll see you, Nara.